I think that more companies should show the courage to ask their customers, do you really need this? Or maybe would you be interested in paying like a carbon fee or an energy fee if we are letting this run only for you?
Hello, and welcome to Environment Variables, brought to you by the Green Software Foundation. In each episode, we discuss the latest news and events surrounding green software. On our show, you can expect candid conversations with top experts in their field who have a passion for how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of software. I'm your host, Chris Adams.
So hello and welcome to The Week in Green Software, the podcast where we explore the latest ideas, innovations and conversations about sustainable software. I'm your guest host, Anne Currie. You're not hearing the dulcet tones of Chris Adams. You are going to have to talk to me instead. So this week, we're diving into a topic that sits right at the heart of how software gets built. And it's also something that I'm extremely interested in. Sustainability across the DevOps cycle. I'm very interested in DevOps and the overlap with sustainability, which I think is utterly the most important part of sustainability for most enterprises. So as more organizations embrace continuous delivery and rapid iteration, the environmental footprint of software isn't just defined by what we build it, but how we build it. There are loads of, this is a much more interesting topic than you're probably thinking. And we often talk about smarter workload scheduling and energy aware orchestration, but I don't think that is the most important thing. So that will be one of the things that we're talking about today. So joining me today is Julian, a software engineer, educator, and sustainability advocate whose work focuses on monitoring sustainability in the DevOps cycle and embedding green practices into university education. So Julian, welcome to the show. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. Hello, dear Green IT fans. My name is Julian Gommlich. I am a software architecture consultant, software engineer, and IT trainer at iTech Progress GmbH. I'm also a lecturer for mathematics and software development. And moreover, together with two of my friends from university, I have co-founded a startup called workhome.digital GmbH, where we are building a platform to support you for your next vacation trip. So if you're interested in a vacation, give us a visit. But today I'm not here to talk about workation or any of the other stuff that I'm doing for a living. I'm here to talk about my great passion. I'm here to talk about green software development, and especially in the light of DevOps. So thank you for having me here today. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure.
It's a delight. I love to talk about DevOps. So as I said, my name is Anne Currie. I am one of the co-authors of the O'Reilly book, Building Green Software. There we go, which everybody who is listening to the podcast should read because we wrote it for you. But I am also one of the primary author on a book about DevOps in practice, effectively, in the cloud, called The Cloud Native Attitude, which I'm very, very proud of. In it, I went and I interviewed a whole load of folk who were going into the cloud and doing really amazing DevOps stuff, which was really about moving very fast iteration. So oddly enough, that's kind of, and I wrote this one before I wrote the Building Green Software one. And it was a big motivator in writing Building Green Software. So I'm very, very happy to talk to Julian today. And I've already warned him that I had an interesting encounter this morning with my local fisherman who's very connected with the UK fishing community and was telling me about all of the effects of climate change on fishing around the UK, which oddly enough reminded me of DevOps. So I'll be forcing Julian to compare the issues of the UK fishing industry with the issues of SMEs and enterprises generally who want to go green. So poor Julian is going to suffer from that. But anyway, actually no. Well, so Julian, first, tell me a little bit about your thinking about DevOps and your approach to DevOps and being green, and then we can talk a little bit about my thinking about it as well. So go for it.
Yeah, and then we're going to talk about fish. So the only thing that I have to do with fish is that I ate salmon this lunch, to be honest. But we're going to find some things where I might be knowledgeable about. So, yeah, as I already said, I am software architecture consultant, now starting in a new job, and a software engineer. But I think most interesting is how I came to Green IT, how this whole thing started. This started in 2021 when I finished my bachelor studies. Some people might know this or might have experienced this themselves. When you finish your bachelor studies and start into your first job, then it can be a little bit, I don't want to say depressing, but it's kind of a strange feeling to know this is now your job. Maybe even for the rest of your life, you are a software engineer. And that's why I was looking for kind of a meaning in my life, in my work life. And so I stumbled across Green IT. I started to read some articles about this topic. I started to watch conference sessions about Green IT on YouTube. And then there was a conference session in the company that I was working for called TWiGS. And there I heard that there's a community for Green IT. And so I became a member of this quite quickly in 2022. And from there on, events unfolded rapidly. I was able to lead a research project on green software patents and architecture patents. I was also asked to join a new software development team with the name Thunderstorm written with an F, not with TH. And together we had the common goal to make the company greener. And to do so, we initiated many small projects. We did tool and technology evaluations. We optimized some web applications and tried out new patterns and technologies. We had some experiments with carbon-aware computing. We also have 2 colleagues which are researching in green AI and so on and so on. So in this time, we were on highest efficiency concerning this, and we were giving presentations in many different occasions and locations across southern Germany. It was also at this time that I started to host and organize the Green Software Development Community Meetup in Nuremberg together with Jürgen Leger from TWiGS GmbH, TWiGS GmbH. And yeah, right now, the last, let's say, step in my Green IT progress is that I'm now becoming a trainer for the ISAQB CPSA Advanced Module Green. So I'm going to be able to train software architects from different companies in how they build their systems in a more energy efficient and resource efficient way.
That's fantastic. And that is very interesting. So you've mentioned a couple of things there that I think they're pulling out and discussing. The first is that it's nice to have something which is a meaning for your job, which is an intrinsic motivation as well as an extrinsic motivation. Oddly enough, that came across. So this week in London was the Green IO London conference, which was very, very good. I spoke at it, and one of the things that came up over and over and again in the talks was how much people liked meeting other people who had a shared interest, a shared desire to do something meaningful with their work and their lives. And the interesting thing about green software is it's both an extrinsic motivation and it is an intrinsic motivation. It's not like it's not like green software is something that is going to act against your business interests. And I think that DevOps is where that really coincides. A good green system is a cheaper system to run because there's less waste. It's a more actively managed system, so it's less insecure. It's more secure because you systems get get better and more efficient all the time. But if you can't update and you can't move to the latest versions of things, then you don't get any of those benefits of both efficiency and security. So there's like resilience. Good DevOps is about a more resilient system that also uses less. So things like auto-scaling is both more efficient, it uses fewer resources, and it's better at providing resilience for your systems. So it's one of the ways I love DevOps, because it's a effectively modern operational practices meet all of the non-functional requirements. They are more secure, they're cheaper, they're more resilient, and they're greener. And to top it all off, they're good, they're motivating. There is an intrinsic motivation from it, and often have a very nice community of people. If you join green groups, people are bonded by a common interest. So yeah, I can totally relate to your feelings about that. Have I summarized that correctly?
Yeah, definitely. And what you said about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivators concerning green IT, I think that you have many employees out of management, so below management, let's say in the hierarchy, which are intrinsically motivated to work on this. Because, for example, they are interested in ecologics anyway, and they are also living a sustainable lifestyle.
Yeah.
And still you have, in many cases, from management perspective, extrinsic, external motivators to get in touch with sustainability. And I think this would be a great opportunity to get these two worlds together, like the management view and the employee view, to get to work.
Well, absolutely, because green software is the only thing, I've been in the tech industry for 30 years, it's the only thing where extrinsic motivations and intrinsic motivations are completely aligned. And I think we have to, it's something we need to keep saying, because I think people are so used to an intrinsic motivation being do less, earn less money, is it costing you money, that we find it very hard to accept the fact that doing the right thing here saves you money and makes your systems more secure and makes your systems more resilient. But the link there is DevOps, to my mind.
Yeah, definitely. Because DevOps gives you the opportunity to always reevaluate your quality goals, your quality scenarios, your quality criteria. And of course, this needs quality criteria to be defined at the beginning of a project. But only with DevOps, you can really ensure that you are always meeting your quality goals. So that, for example, you implement sustainability or energy consumption benchmarking into your project to always have this feedback. Is this new feature still in line with my sustainability goal? Or am I doing something wrong at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, to my mind, so we might want to actually, for the listeners, define what we mean by DevOps. I always feel, because I literally wrote a book in which all I did was try and work out what people really meant by DevOps. And there were all kinds of different tools that we're using, all kinds of different approaches. So it wasn't one tool or approach, but the common factor I found through it was that people were successfully doing it was that they were looking at rolling out things at high speeds of iteration, being able to move. It was being able to cope with change and handle change and move forward in a changing environment, which, of course, we as humans are very good at doing if we choose to do it. A lot of enterprises cannot move. And that is the reverse of DevOps. The ability to move, to my mind, is really the definition of DevOps through automation, mostly. So how do you feel about that?
What's interesting about this is that, so last week I was at the oral exams of the students that I was teaching. So these were their final exams. And I was asking sometimes the question, what is DevOps to? Because it's part of their studies. And there were different approaches. Many people think about tools when hearing DevOps. So like DevOps is pipelining tools. DevOps is containerization. DevOps is my cloud platform service or something like this. For me, DevOps is a philosophy. As you said it, if you're thinking in a DevOps way, then you're already thinking about in minor iterations and thinking about a small milestone that you want to ship. You're not thinking about what could be the problem after the 4 next implemented features. You're thinking about what is the problem now that I want to solve and bring this little piece of code, this little piece of software to your customer as quick as possible. And if you think DevOps first, and now I'm thinking about tools and pipelines and release processes, then you will save time afterwards. Because it's only getting harder to implement DevOps processes with tools when you are doing it too late. So I think it's more of a philosophy thing to say, I want to ship a small amount of value to my customers because a small amount of value is more than no value.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So the risk of constantly plugging my book here, the reason why we wrote it, me and my and our various co-authors over the years, was we didn't really know what it meant, what cloud native meant, and we didn't really know what DevOps meant necessarily. And we came to the conclusion that it was more of a, which is why the title at the end was set after we'd decided what was in the content. We'd written the whole book and interviewed a whole load of people. That it was an attitude, not a tool set, because there was no consistent tool chain. It was really a philosophy, as you say. It was how you approach things rather than, which is going to get me back to my crazy conversation this morning with I saw a local fisherman on the coast of England. So I live on the east coast of England, and there is a local fisherman who literally fishes. I can see them from our window, and he sells his fish from his garage. So I was there this one. He's very chatty, so which is good, and he's very connected with the fishing community of the UK. So he's always a useful resource for me. So I had a very interesting, but also a depressing conversation this morning, because the UK waters. He was saying they hadn't got any fresh fish this week, and it was because it was too windy. So that wasn't really about climate change, but he said that fundamentally the number of fish in the UK waters has really declined massively because the water has got a lot warmer. Very, very quickly got a lot warmer. So the fish things like cod have gone, even sea bass is a bit warm for them. The lobsters don't like it being so warm. And they're starting to see new fish arrive. So, it is a self-balancing system. They are starting to see new fish. There is no tuna being caught off the UK coast, which is completely revolutionary. All the skate has disappeared. No one knows why across the whole of Britain. But the sea temperature has changed in Britain very, very rapidly, and eventually the new fish will come in. In the meantime, there's a bit of a dearth of fish at the moment, because the fish can die more quickly than the new fish can arrive and start to adapt to the situation. Algae arrives much more. There seems to be a lot of algae around, and new algae that they haven't really identified yet, and there's nothing to eat it because obviously the algae reacts more quickly and changes more quickly than the fish do. But it kind of. It's like it reminded me of DevOps because the scary thing about climate change is that it's happening very fast. And so generally, ecosystems don't have time to adapt to it because ecosystems adapt quite slowly and climate change is happening very quickly. If ecosystems could adapt quickly, there would be much less of a problem. Because all things can be coped with if you can adapt. So that was why it kind of reminded me of DevOps. as things change, the fisherman was saying, "Oh, it's a good job I've also do with all this other stuff as well, which I've been able to do to, I'm a scrap metal merchant, so I did a bit more of that while I wasn't doing my, because we're not catching as many fish. So fortunately, I've got some other things to juggle around." And it kind of reminded me, you need a lifestyle, you need a life where you can react to change and go, well, if I can't do that, I'll do that instead. If I can't, it reminded me of the DevOps thing of graceful downgrades. Well, I can't do that, so I'll do that. I can't scale up at the moment because there's no bandwidth or there's no hardware, there's no server. So I'll do something. I'll drop my quality of service. Those kind of DevOps mindsets are utterly key at the moment for all kinds of things. We are living in a more changing world than we've ever seen before. It also reminded me of AI, because a lot of people are going, "Oh, well, everything's changing because of AI." We need the ability to change. And fortunately, humans can automate, and fish can't, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, that's maybe the core difference between the fish example and the DevOps example, that in a DevOps team, in a DevOps environment, we are embracing change and we are following a change gracefully. Meaning that if we would confront with change like the fish, it would mean that we all would lose our jobs and new people with new ideas and new attitudes would come into a company. Because of a social aspect, of course, we cannot do that. We shouldn't do that. I wouldn't opt for it because I also need my job. So we are doing the graceful change. I mean, for this, we have agile processes also in software development. We have tools and methods like retrospective meetings where we can find ways to make our process better and to adjust it to our environmental impacts. And in this case, we're not even talking about green in terms of environmental, but also if you have other teams that you have to work with, if you have interfaces with these teams that you need to comply to. And I think this is our strength in agile software development and in DevOps, to be able to make this graceful change apart from having a hard cut in your processes and maybe even in your human relations and human resources.
Yeah, actually, what you're saying there reminds me of a famous quote by the physicist Max Planck, which is, "Science advances one funeral at a time." In some areas, people don't want to change. We are, and in those cases where people just don't want to change, they say, "Well, we've done this forever." Although, to be honest, that can only in the tech industry be 20, 30 years maximum. We just haven't been doing this stuff all that long. If you can't change, your industry is your enterprise will fail. There are advantages that the fish have, that they have quite a short lifestyle. They can only advance one funeral at a time. Some fish go, some new fish arrive. For humans, obviously, we don't have to wait for the funeral. We can adopt the new strategy without waiting for the funeral, without having to have old folk move entirely through their career and retire and new folk come in, because that's too slow. The greenest thing you can do, I really think, is start getting used to the idea of adopting modern operational practices. In some ways, it's a little controversial when I say that. So I was reminded of it. I was talking to somebody, a senior person at AWS, about how they could cut the carbon use, cut the energy use in their data centers. And he was saying, the single biggest thing that would cut the energy use in our data centers, and we're constantly trying to persuade our customers to do it. So many people run Python. but they run older versions of Python, which are really, really inefficient. They're insecure and they're inefficient. And Python has massively improved into inefficiency. But most of their customers are still running the old versions, which are 10 times worse, 100 times worse. So that's just waste. But the issue is, it's actually quite hard to migrate Python. You really do need good DevOps skills to migrate your systems to later versions of Python. But there, it's just adopting better migration skills and moving your systems and changing. That would be saying, that would make a very material difference to the energy use of AWS data centers. And it's a pure DevOps thing.
This not only goes for Python, to be honest, but for nearly all programming languages that are still in use. So, for example, I know one colleague who always advocates for updating .NET versions because C#.NET made massive improvements to the efficiency of the compiler and also of the... Does C# have a runtime environment like Java? I don't know, to be honest. But there were...
I think it does.
It does, yeah. So massive improvements to the compiler as well as to the runtime environment. And same goes for Java, for example. If we are looking at advancements like, for example, virtual threads in Java 21, which is a beautiful way to solve the problem of having not enough threads to manage all requests that are coming into your web application. Because for those who don't know virtual threads, Java always had these so-called platform threads, meaning that for every thread on your computer that Java is allowed to allocate, there's one platform thread mirrored to the Java virtual machine. Since Java 21, you can activate virtual threads, meaning that there is another layer of abstraction between the application code and the platform threads called the virtual threads. And these virtual threads need not a whole core and only, I think, 100 megabytes of RAM each, which means that you can spawn nearly unlimited amounts of request threads on your server, because on a server you have 64 gigabytes of RAM or even more sometimes, and also hundreds or more cores. So meaning that this is not a problem anymore. Plus, virtual threads are very easy to spawn and very easy to destroy, making them more efficient. So the moral of the story is that in many cases, in most cases, software is getting more efficient over time because more people are having a look at it, improving it, optimizing it, and also removing the pitfalls where you are losing efficiency. But I can also say that I was in a team 4 years ago where we were 4 or 5 engineers and we had 5 applications to maintain and another application to also improve or develop, meaning that maintenance was a problem for us. Because, for example, we had the upgrade from Spring Boot 2 to Spring Boot 3, which had massive implications on the implementation. And for us, this was also a challenge to manage this with only so few people. So I can understand that people say migrating is a challenge. But if you don't migrate, you have a technical debt that is going to bite you somewhere. So you shouldn't forget about doing it constantly. And I mean, by now we have tools like Dependabot on GitHub or RenovateBot, which are doing this work for you, at least in the easy cases.
Yeah. But it is a mindset there. It is the DevOps mindset to keep migrating and keep making the changes. Because the longer you leave it, the worse it is, to the point where it just feels like, well, we might as well just go out of business rather than debt. I mean, it's, as I say, it is completely, DevOps is completely associated with growth. The businesses who can change They can say that they can play around and do trial and error and try out new features for customers. They can move. It is completely, it's green and it's growth and it's, so I have to say we've gone completely and totally off what we had intended to talk about today. Is there anything that, but that's why I always like to run the podcast that way. Is there anything you want to talk about that we have not talked about? I mean, I sent you we had a whole load of things to discuss, which we have not talked on at all. But is there anything that you picked up from your discussions that you do that you want to bring up?
So looking at the script, there was one part that I found extremely interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Where we had the topic of electricity maps. So, of course, the listeners and viewers don't see the script that we are having.
No, but what we will do is what we do talk about, we'll link in the show notes below. So people will be able to say, so at this point, go and have a look at this article that will be in the show notes about electricity maps.
Yeah, perfect. Because there was an interview, it's a 4-minute YouTube video from Google together with the founder and CEO of Electricity Maps, Olivier Corradi. I hope that I pronounced it correctly. And he's talking about how he came to the idea of building electricity maps with an open source community and how he sees that the electricity market is changing right now, because he also speaks about the rapid increase in energy storage and how he envisions a future where real-time grid data and forecasting becomes central to software and infrastructure operation. So before we dive into it, I want to say that I love his story. I love that Olivier is saying, like, he is in Denmark and he is bugged by the fact that companies are claiming they are 100% green, they are 100% carbon neutral. But if you look at it, they are using the Danish energy mix, which is not completely green. And so he has this idea to bring transparency to the energy grid. And then he has an open source community behind him that pushed this idea. And now it has become such an integral part of the green software movement. I mean, everybody who has listened to at least one talk about green software development has heard about electricity maps. And I think it's also in your book, right, Anne?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And they made the marvelous, I don't know whose idea it was, but the marvelous, they have these great pictures where different grids have, different colors, which is really good because it's an instant way for people to understand that grids, even across Europe, the grids are completely different in how green they are. It's an instant, really great piece of communication.
I mean, you could even break it down furthermore.
Oh, yeah, should do.
Because, for example, in Germany, we have huge differences in how green the energy grid is. So I right now live in Nuremberg, which is in the southern part of Germany. And of course, here's not much water. So there's no hydropower possible. But what would be possible would be wind energy and solar energy. And in certain regions here in Bavaria, this is also already built, but Bavaria could do more. There are other parts of Germany, like the coastal regions in the north, that are having much offshore wind energy production. And there we could say that there's nearly always green energy available, as long as the wind is blowing. But yeah, I think it could be even more detailed, this map. But for Germany, it's really interesting because we have these changes in how much green energy is available at a certain point of time. Because we have this, especially this dependency on how much the sun shines with much solar energy.
Yes, it is. You make a very good point there. I really like the electricity maps because it demonstrates different places have different greenness of their grid. But it, to a certain extent, hides the fact that, in fact, it's very much more granular than that. Electricity doesn't get very far from where it's generated. Mm-hmm. At Green I/O this week, there was a talk from the creator of a company called Carbon Runner, which moves kind of spot instances, small, container wrapped jobs to data centers where where it's granularly green, where the local electricity is quite. It was a really interesting. It was a really interesting talk. It was very good. But I thought one of the really excellent parts of his talk was he had a photo on Google Maps of the data center and of saying, look, this is a good data center and this is a bad data center. And what he would do is on Google Maps, he would have a photo of the Google, satellite view, photo of the data center, and marks on his cycle from the nearest electricity generating source to that data center. And so, saying, well, this one is 2 miles, and here's my cycle from the nearest electricity source, which was a coal-fired power station. That is what it will be powering this data center. Doesn't matter what's on the grid generally. Electricity doesn't get that far from where it's generated. That data center will be powered by that coal-fired power station. And then he had another one where he'd cycled from a local hydroelectric, and he'd say, this one is 2 miles from this hydroelectric station. This is what is going to be powering this data center. You have to be quite granular in your choice of data centers. And I thought it was a really excellent way of, a bit like electricity maps, a really good visualization of the issue. Electricity just doesn't get very far from where it's generated.
I mean, I think it's a good abstraction to say that even though there is a coal power plant near this, and this coal power plant is always going to deliver energy to this data center, to claim that this data center has its power generation from, for example, wind energy or solar energy. I mean, now we are getting into the territory where I'm not very sure that I'm correct, but I'm anyway going to say it. A coal power plant can be reduced to a minimum of production.
That's true. Actually, yeah, you are right.
Where you are still throwing coal in, but just to keep the oven hot. So the worst thing that could happen to a coal power plant is that the fire is off. If you have this, then this coal power plant has a problem. So it means that you always have to have a minimal fire running. And if, for example, the wind is blowing, the sun is shining, you have green energy, you can reduce this coal power plant to a minimum operation. And only if wind stops, sun is not shining anymore, you can increase the operation of this coal power plant. So a little bit like carbon-aware computing, where you can also increase or decrease your service level as long as you have or have not green energy in the grid at the moment.
Actually, you make a very good point there, because that's something that I read recently. So China gets a lot of stick every time there's a report that says, oh well, they built all these new gas-fired power stations, or they built all these new coal-fired power stations. And the point in the article was, just because you built the capacity doesn't mean the capacity is being used. It's often backup capacity that you can turn down or even turn off. If it's, gas, you just completely turn it off and turn it on again. You need it there just in case, but that doesn't mean, but in many ways, those kind of resources support the building of solar and wind, because, as we know, it's not always sunny and it's not always windy, and you do need to have an emergency. And it's so much better to just occasionally use gas in an emergency than it is to run it all the time. So yeah, it's Yeah, you're quite right. Although I like the thing about, that the nearest power station, if it's on, is the one that's going to be used. But you're making a good point. That power station doesn't necessarily need to be on.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to have both perspectives on this, because if you would claim like, oh, there is a windmill, no, not windmill. How is it called in English? Windrad.
Windmill. So wind turbine. Yeah.
Wind turbine. If there is a wind turbine directly next to a data center, the data center owner or the company owning this data center is going to claim we are green. And in many cases, that's not the case, because there are other things going on. For example, the supply chain for all the materials for the data center could be delivered in a not green way, or the way that they are using and consuming energy could be wasteful. And that's why it's good to have the broader picture, the complete picture, when looking at statements like this. Statements like, this is a green data center, this is not a green data center.
Yeah, so there's another article that we haven't covered yet, but now I'm about to cover, so it will be in the show notes below, which is about, it's been recently announced that Google are going to build an enormously huge data center in the near, quite close to where I live, just on the kind of M25 around the outskirts of London. It's going to be absolutely huge. And so we were going to be discussing, do we think this is good or do we think this is bad? And I was going to say, the interesting thing here is, even though I'm very involved in this area and I talk to people, I talk to the governments, I talk to data center builders, I have no idea whether this is good or bad, because I don't know what the British strategy is for providing energy to data centers in that area. There's quite a lot of electricity, of offshore wind around London, and there's quite a lot of grid capacity. But there's also an incredibly large amount of competition for electricity from all the people who live in London. So I don't know whether having a data center in London, my guess is it's a terrible idea, because it's in competition with all the industry, all the people who live in London. Generally, you don't want to be using space and electricity, where, the Chinese strategy on this is separate out the compute from the people. They have a strategy called East Data, which is really East People, and West Computing. So, you've got loads of space to build your solar power plants and your turbines and your nuclear power stations in the West. So have your data centers there and just send the data back and forth, which is considerably easier. Don't get in the way of all the people in the East. So that seems to me like a really good strategy. So I'm interested that is the UK not taking that strategy because they have a different strategy? Or are they not taking that strategy because they're idiots? I don't know. I literally don't know. I would love for the UK government to be communicating their strategy. I would love to imagine that they have a strategy. So I cannot pass any judgment on this. And I don't expect you to, because if I don't know and I'm pretty involved in this, then how will you know? But what's the situation in Germany? Do you feel there is a national strategy for where data centers are placed? Or are you a bit like the UK and maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but you certainly don't know what it is?
So I need to say that the only, let's say, data center-esque development that I was following was that there was this new supercomputer built in a tiny little town near Cologne. And I think that most data centers in Germany are built close to bigger cities, or at least bigger towns. So, for example, we have this huge data center in Frankfurt. We have data centers in Leipzig, which is the eastern part of Germany. We have data centers around Berlin and Hamburg, and also in the coastal regions. What I like about the German data center infrastructure is that they are very decentralized and they are owned by different host companies. Some even directly from there. So, for example, I know a Saxonian company called Cloud and Heat, and they have a data center in Saxony, so in Leipzig. And I like this, to be honest, that you have these small data centers that belong to like a regional company. But I also know that a huge hyperscaler like Google, like AWS, like Azure has more capabilities to make computing more efficient in their data center. So as you said, it's not easy to find a conclusion whether it's good or not that, for example, Google is building such a data center near London. I simply hope that the workload that they are computing inside the data center is relevant to the customers, is relevant to society, and relevant to the companies that are letting them work. And it is not just some stupid stuff that nobody needs.
But Bitcoin mining.
Bitcoin mining, or like the 20th stupid LinkedIn profile picture generated by AI. So
yes, well, it's interesting. Although is very hard to judge, isn't it? What is so? I would say that DevOps is about, to a certain extent, not judging. It's like, well, we will put it out there and see if it's what people want. We won't say, well, we're going to plan a project a whole year in advance because, on the basis that we're going to guess what all our customers are going to want, and we're going to all burn ourselves out on this project that we launch, and then it turns out nobody wanted it anyway. The whole point of DevOps is, suck it and see, trial and error. You just don't know what the outcome is going to be.
If you're in a pure DevOps environment and you really have small increments where you are where you are delivering value to your customer and you can try out, then it's better to simply do something, to write a prototype, to simply code it in a way that it works and show it to the customer than to have endless discussions about this. So I know from projects that I was involved in where we had workshops with 30 people involved, and afterwards like task forces built, which led to the project start being delayed already 2 months, just because we were trying to discuss everything out. I mean, in complex environments, it can be useful to ask different players and find where might be the biggest challenges and problems in a project. But anyway, you should quickly start prototyping. You should quickly start doing your analysis, whether or not things are possible to do or not. And this is closely intertwined with this DevOps mindset, because you want to have the ability to quickly bring something to the customer so you can have this feedback. Otherwise, you will never have this feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah. The ability to move fast and discover and change. And we've talked for a long time, and it's all been quite, we have intensely discussed a lot of stuff. And I'm very pleased that you were on here, and I'm very pleased in what we talked about, because as I say, I still think that DevOps is secretly the most important thing in the entirety of green software. For the vast majority of enterprises. I mean, it's lovely that there are all these people doing efficiency improvements and kind of stuff, but without DevOps, those efficiency improvements will never be taken up by most enterprises. It is absolutely key that they can take them. And in order to take them, the DevOps is the best, or modern operational practices are the best way to do it. So is there anything else you want to finish off before we can this episode of Environment Variables?
Maybe to what you just said about the operational principles. There I want to emphasize that companies should show more courage to ask their customers what they really need and what they don't always need. So thinking about which part of your systems, of your IT systems, do not have to be available at all times. Because this enables you as a company to decide whether you can shut down certain systems if they are not needed or if the energy mix is not green or not. Because many companies are very afraid of losing customer satisfaction. But only because like 3 people are needing this service 24 hours and 7 days a week doesn't mean that your customer satisfaction is going into the cellar. So I think that more companies should show the courage to ask their customers, do you really need this? Or maybe would you be interested in paying like a carbon fee or an energy fee if we are letting this run only for you?
I have to say, I'm gonna the feedback slightly on that, which is something we cover in building green software a lot. Over specification of availability is incredibly expensive. People don't know how expensive it is. It's unbelievably expensive. 5 nines when in fact you just need 2 nines is not on. It's not unusual. But the downside is if you ask a customer, they will always say, I need 5 nines. They always overspecify. So in fact, I would say that the difficulty is if you ask them, they will say, I desperately need 5 nines. They don't. It is a situation where you need to lead them, not ask them. You need to say, you only need 2 nines. 2 nines is absolutely the right thing for you. It will cost you this X amount less, and it will be better for the environment. And it is actually what you need, not 5 nines. That is the wrong thing for you. Trust us. We are the experts here. This is what you need. I think this is an absolutely classic example of an area where customers benefit from being led. Because otherwise, what has a tendency to happen is that sales folk go, what do you need? And the customers say 5 nines. And they'll go, yeah, we'll do 5 nines. And they go back to the engineers, and the engineers go, well, we just can't do 5 nines on it's not realistic. We can't achieve it. So what the customers get is not 5 nines. And then they're more annoyed because if something happens, you're effectively lying about what they've got. It reminds me of somebody. I won't describe. I won't say which company this is, but this was a major company, and I was talking to them about one team within that company. I was talking to another team, with the ops, an ops team within that company, and they were saying, this service is available 5 nines, and they said, is it? Because I've tried that service. So they were thinking, I've tried that service. And they were fairly expert. And they were thinking, I'm pretty sure this wasn't 5 nines. And they said, are you sure it's 5 nines? And they said, oh yes, yeah, obviously not all the time. And that is unfortunately the situation that you end up in when you overpromise to customers things that are unrealistic. Everybody ends up in a worse situation. So you got to lead. You got to be brave enough. But as you say, you got to be brave enough to explain the situation to them and say you don't need it.
And this not only goes for availability, but also for the time that they are expecting your workload to be finished in. So, for example, if you have asynchronous jobs that can wait for multiple hours, you don't have to implement them so that they are finished synchronously or started synchronously. And another thing, which is, I think it's not spoken enough about, is accuracy, twitching the accuracy of your algorithms. I mean, I was working for a company which made 14 million payrolls every month. Of course, they have to be accurate. No question. Everybody wants to have the correct amount of money on their payroll every month, and companies don't want to pay too much. So there we need 100% accuracy. But we can think about image recognition, conversion, or generation algorithms. where we are completely fine with accuracies lower than 100%. For example, if I'm taking a photo and asking which kind of plant is this, I don't need 100% accuracy by the analysis algorithm. It's okay if it has more than 80% accuracy. Or image generation is another great example. We can see right now that people are happily using images generated by AI with flaws, where letters are having a strange twist, or where lines are not lines, but curves. So we can see that people are okay with flawed accuracy, and we can save with this, because an algorithm which can save 5% and still be accurate enough is a service which saves 5% energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And something we talked about earlier is graceful downgrade. And if you have the ability to say, if it's green on the grid, it's the same process that we've always done for keeping the internet up. The internet, if there's tons of bandwidth, fill your boots, use that bandwidth. But if it's not, if there's not, then it's better to downgrade the service and offer something that's good enough, SD rather than HD or whatever, than nothing at all. So, the ability to react and respond and gracefully downgrade or upgrade, depending on your circumstances, is classic DevOps, isn't it, really?
It is, yes, definitely.
It's the classic DevOps attitude or philosophy. We've chatted for a whole hour, and I feel that was a very, very good chat. And I'd like to thank you yet again for this. And the show notes below, there will be a lot of links to what we've talked about, and also links to a couple of events that are coming up across Europe in October that might be of interest. I think there's one in I can't remember where they all are. They're all over Europe. So go and have a look and see if there's one local to you. It's a really nice community. I had a lovely time at Green.io London this week because, as we discussed at the beginning of this, you will meet a lot of like-minded people who are intrinsically motivated by what you're intrinsically motivated by, but also want to do good work for their companies, which is where the DevOps overlap takes place. So thank you very much, Julian. And hopefully we will speak again at some point.
Definitely. Thank you very much for having me here today. I can also add to the events that if you are living in Nuremberg or close to Nuremberg and have spare time on the 7th of October, we are going to host the next Green IT meetup. Just go to meetup.com, look for Green Software Development Nuremberg, and you're going to find where this meetup is going to happen.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much indeed, and I hope you have a very successful meetup.
Thank you very much.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Just a reminder to follow Environment Variables on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please do leave a rating and review if you like what we're doing. It helps other people discover the show. And of course, we'd love to have more listeners. To find out more about the Green Software Foundation, please visit greensoftware.foundation. That's greensoftware.foundation in any browser. Thanks again, and see you in the next episode.